Let's get started. Good evening. My name is Terrence Carroll, and I'm chair of the King County Districting Committee. I'm here this evening with my colleagues Rod Dembowski and John Jensen on my right, and Sally Nelson and Sally Poliak on my left. Thank you for joining us here at Van Asselt Community Center here in Seattle. Those of you who are in attendance and who will be talking with us should know that tonight's meeting will be recorded by King County Television, cable channel 22, and I understand it will be rebroadcast at least once on July 14th. What I'd like to do here is start with some background about our committee just briefly, and then hear from our GIS expert, John Schlosser, who is in the corner, not deliberately so, but is nonetheless ready to talk to us here shortly. I think those of you here in attendance tonight know that under the laws that govern our country, every 10 years following a census, we're required to take a look at various legislative districts. And the charge for our committee is to take a look at the King County Council districts, of which there are 9, and there were formerly 13 such districts. Those districts were narrowed to 9 approximately 7 years ago by vote of the people. But King County between 2000 and 2010 grew by 11%. There was different growth, though, throughout the county. For example, the city of Seattle grew by 8%, yet the other districts in the county, for example, on the east side, District 3, grew by nearly 27%. So our committee's job is to balance this district population to ensure, as is required under the law, that each citizen has an equal voice in county government, certainly by way of the district boundaries that we're required to do. You should also know that there's another districting committee at work that's looking at the legislative districts that also are drawn every 10 years. Myself and the committee members that are working with me are, like most of you, volunteers. We are here because we want to help draw these lines in a way that is fair and effective for the representatives of all the citizens of King County. The law has certain requirements, and we're given this task. The law requires that council districts be compact, contiguous, and composed of economic and geographic units. Population data, we are told and required to follow, may not be used for purposes of favoring or disfavoring any racial group or political party. We're also required to consider many other factors, including city boundaries, natural features, and communities of interest. There are 4 maps that you're going to hear more about in detail. These were developed by the committee with significant help from John Schlosser, our GIS expert, after 3 public hearings were held throughout the county. Each plan that you see explores a different way to draw equally populated districts that meet legal requirements and that take into consideration the public input that we've had. In addition, over the last several weeks, we've had several public meetings, and this is yet another meeting that we're having tonight with you here at Van Asselt. We have also solicited comment from the municipalities in King County, of which there are 39. And I think it's important, here we are in Seattle, where many of us live, to recognize that this county that we're a part of is significant in size. The 39 municipalities are simply one way of measuring, and as you know, there also are unincorporated areas of King County, which are part of the landscape of the county. This county is larger than several of our states in its dimension. After this meeting, we're going to have our meetings then where we'll take the public input, look at the maps, the 4 maps that we have, and draw a single final district plan. We are required to have that plan by January 15th of 2012, but we intend to do so quite a bit earlier and to hopefully have it in early fall. Once we have that final plan, we will also have a public meeting at which input will be solicited from the public. Once that final draft is approved by this committee, it is not something that needs to be voted on or can be voted on. The only way it can be changed is by court or legal challenge. There's other ways to input our group as we move along here, and certainly there is a website, a web address, at kingcounty.gov/districting, kingcounty.gov/districting, which provides two things for you. First, a way for input, and secondly, to follow the work of our committee. I'd now like to turn the mic over to John Slosser, who is our GIS expert, and we'll talk about the 4 maps that you have. And by the way, if you didn't see as you entered, there is this handout that Simon Fred, our staff, has prepared that helps go over what John's about ready to talk about here, and has important information about the demographics of the district on the page behind each map as well. Thank you, John.
Thank you. So we'll start by talking briefly about the arrangement of population in King County in general. And then I want to focus in on a couple of areas, 2 or 3 areas of the county where the committee's heard a lot of testimony about there being common interest and collaboration and cooperation, as well as issues that maybe go beyond that. And then finally, briefly touch on the 4 draft plans, the ones that you've seen out front and that are part of your handout, with special reference to the areas of those plans that are around where we are tonight here in South Seattle. So what we're seeing on the screen here is an arrangement of where the county boundaries and the districts in the current county are. The text below is describing the level of change needed in each of the boundaries. In most cases, you can see that the word expand occurs. These are areas where the district really needs to get bigger to achieve the goal, which is, among other things, to have roughly equal population in each of the districts, and that's to serve the one person, one vote goals that the chair has talked about. Over on the east side of the county, there are a couple big districts, big geographically, but also big in terms of population growth. They need to shrink. You'll see the District 3 in particular needs to be reduced in size by 30,000 people. Okay, a little bit about where we were and where we're going. If we look quickly at the population distribution across our districts, back based on the year 2000 census, pretty flat across the 9 districts. There's been growth since the year 2000. Everybody knows that. It's happened in all districts. There has been growth in all districts, but the speed and the pace of growth has been different in different districts. That's why there's this imbalance that we're trying to address. Based on the year 2000 census, the rough average population in terms of a goal for the number of people in a single district was roughly 193,000. And now with the year 2010 census, that's up to a target of about 214 plus a little bit. So all districts pretty much have grown, but as you can see, some of the districts need to adjust their boundaries to create a commonality in terms of the degree of representation for each person in the district.
I'm sorry, I can't see. Can you make those numbers larger?
These numbers here. Let's see.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So moving then to the second, that's just a general arrangement of how population varies district by district. One other thing to show you here, in terms of the county as a whole, these dots represent about 20 people. It's hard to resolve, but I think the intent and the message is still clear. This is a county that's very big, but the population density is heavily weighted toward the west. In fact, the actual center in terms of geographic center of population, when you weight population and find a geographic center, in the year 2000 census, it was roughly in this area. And in the year 2010 census, it shifted just about a third of a mile to the east, not far. And that's because of the proportion of population that still remains in the west. So shifting quickly to a series of views of things that have come before the committee as issues of interest. These aren't the only issues of interest, but these are certainly some of them. Here in the south part of the county, this area here, we have a series of small cities There's been testimony heard that emphasizes the way that these cities now collaborate with each other, cooperate with each other. Whole other set of cities here around SeaTac, smaller cities, not in the city of Seattle, not really as large population-wise or area-wise, perhaps as Kent and Renton, a set of cities that do a lot of collaboration. And then also another area of interest expressed in some testimony, this area between the city of Seattle and the city of Renton, West Hill, and the West Hill and the potential annexation area there between Renton and the city of Seattle. There are some other groups of cities, small cities out along the I-90 corridor. People have expressed interest in that as a grouping, and a set of small cities toward the northern boundary of the county as well.
Is the map that you're showing now corresponding to discussion that, I don't know where we are, I'm sorry.
No problem. So what we're talking about now is just the general overview of what's happening in the county. This is not one of the 4 maps. There are no real boundaries for districts here except the current boundaries for the year 2005. Mm-hmm.
Can you wait? Just so people on TV can hear it, please wait until you get the microphone.
Okay, I have a question again. I'm sorry, I apologize. I was late. I didn't realize that it was a meeting, and I was very curious about districting, particularly because I also work for a school district. But our districting now, the way it is pretty bizarre as far as Tukwila and Seattle, and I guess part of Renton as well. So I think it's good in a way, all depending on how you go about it, though, because the way it is now, it's horrendous. When you go to the, like I said, the Seattle, the Tukwila, and Renton area. I mean, there are parts of Renton school district that's inside of Seattle, as well as the Tukwila. So I think I'm glad that you're doing this. You're going around the community, but I would like to see as well, now I don't know where you're all from, but it would be nice if we get different people on the committee, and I think you know what I'm talking about. That would be wonderful. I'll just stop there with that. Okay.
That may not satisfy
Yes.
your concern, but
Yes. But, yeah, I'd like to see a little diversity there, too. Excuse me.
You know, in response a little bit, John, to that question, I think it's important that we're not dealing with school districts. We're dealing with King County Council districts, and we know of the school districts and have heard of those concerns actually at other meetings.
You're missing my point.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that is part of it, but you're missing my point. That helps with, that's part of districting. If you have areas that are really Seattle, but you're saying it's Renton, which this is happening, and you have areas that you say are Seattle, but are technically, and were technically Tukwila until we started districting and putting these areas in another area, and then it's all, okay, for lack of a better word, screwed up. So I hope when you go to district that you look at those addresses as well. If they're Seattle, then let's look at it. Let's look at if they are, because, for instance, I just used the schools, you know, as an example, but it's actually the, you know, the addresses that I was trying to point out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So as we compare the 4 plans, and they are draft plans, I want to point out some areas in which the plans differ. We'll go through each of the plans very briefly, but there are some specific areas where there are distinct differences between and among the plans. One is how this West Hill Skyway area between Renton and the city of Seattle is handled. I think all the plans put it entirely in one district or another. It's not any longer split in any of the current plans. Another area is how this area around SeaTac is apportioned. These lines that currently divide District 8 and District 5 are different in the different plans. There are some changes with respect to Issaquah that we'll cover. There's a change in one plan, significant change with respect to Mercer Island. And then up here in the north part of Seattle, the boundary line between District 2 and District 1 in the north shifts up and down depending on the plan. So there's some distinct changes there. There are other changes elsewhere, but I'm trying to focus on the part of the district plans that are closer to where we are right now, here in the south end of Seattle. So let's go to the specific plans, and we'll go through each of them in turn and mention a few highlights. This is Plan 1. All these plans, of course, are on display out there, and I think you have handouts for them. Some significant aspects of this plan, District 5, which is down here. In this plan, it now encompasses Normandy Park and half of Burien. The green line on your map is where the old boundaries were, and this darker brown line is as proposed in this draft. And I think in your handout also there's a map that shows the current boundaries. You can look at them left and right and kind of compare them, hopefully easily. In this plan, District 2 is extended down through that potential annexation area I mentioned to encompass about half, the north half of the city of Renton. So District 2 is shifted to the south in this plan. Its northern border stops at the Ship Canal. That's a little different than where it is now, which is up about even with Green Lake.
And it would appear that where we're sitting is in District 2, and that Beacon Avenue is the main dividing line, or can you tell from that?
Yes, on this map, Beacon Avenue is the dividing line.
All right. So people then on the other side of Beacon Avenue would be District 9
8.
On the west side.
On the west side, we have 8.
And on the east side, which is, I think, where we are, I know where is District 2.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you. Moving to draft plan number 2.
I'm sorry, John, just to follow up on Judge Carroll's point, that dividing line of Beacon is a current district dividing line between 2 and 8 today.
It is.
Okay.
It is the current line, and it's also the line under this draft plan. A couple of variations down here in the south, but there's sort of housekeeping improvements, I think, in terms of intent. Let's move to draft plan 2. Probably the most prominent aspect of draft plan 2 is that Mercer Island, which previously was part of District 6, which is mostly Bellevue, under this plan, Mercer Island becomes part of District 2. District 2 no longer encroaches, if you will, into this potential annexation area, a different school district down here below the City of Seattle boundary. Under this plan, District 2 stops at the city limits, the south end, and that potential annexation area in its entirety becomes part of the District 5, where Renton as a whole is. Other change with this plan, this is Plan 2 again, District 8, which previously in the current districting stops here more to the north. Under this plan, that boundary shifts south a bit. That's draft plan 2. We'll shift to draft plan 3. In this plan, District 2 becomes wider here in the Beacon Hill, Rainier Valley area. It shifts all the way to, in the north-south direction, it shifts all the way over to I-5. So it's not following Beacon Avenue anymore in this plan. District 2 extends further. It does include all of the potential annexation area that sort of currently split between the Renton district, if you will, and this District 2, one of the Seattle districts. So that's a distinction of this plan. Also in this plan, District 6 shifts south to cover most of Bellevue. And otherwise, there are a lot of similarities with the current district boundaries.
So in this plan, excuse me for asking, Mercer Island becomes part of District 6?
Mercer Island is part of District 6 in this plan. That's also the status quo, so that's really not a change. Yeah. There's only one plan, one draft plan, in which Mercer Island becomes part of District 2. That's draft 2. Thank you. Draft Plan 4, again focusing on the area near where we're meeting. This one also has a wider District 2, so it widens District 2 down in the area where we're meeting tonight. The potential annexation area down here towards Renton is entirely within the Renton district, if you will, District 5, instead of being split between 2 and 5. This plan also here in the northerly part of District 2 in Capitol Hill, instead of following 16th Avenue East, it shifts the western boundary over to I-5. So it really encompasses now all of Capitol Hill, First Hill, and Beacon Hill. And in the District 8 area, down around the airports, District 8 is expanded to the south. The dividing line, instead of being up to the north of the runways, dividing line down between District 5 and District 8, now at South 188th Street. So those are the 4 draft plans. And I'm going to wrap up, but I think in closing, if you've followed this, and we've tried to go through it quickly, just hitting a few highlights, if you followed them, there are these differences, but by and large, the common message is that the changes are not huge. There are a couple aspects in which a change is significant, particularly whatever happens with Mercer Island and Draft Plan 2. But by and large, it's more a matter of adjusting things along the edge rather than making wholesale major changes. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, John. And our protocol has been to let people ask questions, as you've already done, by the way, and those are certainly welcome. Any other questions of John will, I think he would welcome those if you have any, based on what's been said so far. And I think to underline the point you're making, John, the current districts have approximately 194,000 per district, and that's roughly apportioned as based on a 2000 census. Yes. And now they have to expand to 214,000 given the growth on the average. And keep in mind that those don't have to be exact, but we're trying to make them as close as we practically can. And that is, I think, what would be a reasonable expectation of the law in the community. And also that we are not required to accept any one of these 4. I think we can take a look based on the input and our own discernment with the help of our expert what makes sense. But as I've said to my colleagues repeatedly, we have to draw the line somewhere. And 214,000 is a large district no matter what. So we have our work cut out for us and really are welcoming your input. And that's the reason, as you would appreciate, for our meetings. By the way, we have always recognized public officials who are here tonight, and I hope I am not missing anybody, but there is Lisa Jensen here, who is a council member from the city of Newcastle, and throughout our meetings in the community, we have, I think, really been honored by having public officials here as well, and appreciate that. Now, this is a chance, and we had a sign-up sheet, and I'll get to that, but even if you've listened and also want to participate, it certainly is okay. On the list in front of me, I have Sherry Kayab. Is that you? And I hope I didn't do too badly with your name, but I'd ask if you would come forward here and talk to us and identify yourself maybe better than I did, okay?
Good evening, district committee members. My name is Cherry Kayabia, that's how it's pronounced, and I work with the United for Fair Representation Coalition, a newly formed group of leaders and organizations serving communities of color across Washington state. Our groups include the Win-Win Network, One America, Latino Community Fund, the Asian Pacific Americans for Civic Empowerment, the Black PAC, and the Tacoma Black Collective, and more. We have come together through this 2011 redistricting process to advocate for the creation of congressional, legislative, and county council districts that include a majority of people of color so that our communities are fairly and proportionately represented in halls of government. Before you, that I just passed out, is a unity map we created of proposed King County Council districts. It shows that creating 3 majority-minority county council districts is achievable, and that's the orange, pink, and purple districts. Each have about a plus minus 5% variance of 214,000 population. We've done analysis of your 4 draft districts, and none propose the 3 majority-minority districts that George Chung of the Win-Win Network previously requested at a hearing. We found that Proposal 3 had 2 majority-minority districts. However, we request that you revise your district drafts to include these 3 majority-minority districts. 35%, or 1 in 3 King County residents, is a person of color, and this diversity is not reflected in the King County Council, and with all due respect, this committee. We urge you to draw the boundaries based on our unity maps so that communities of color in King County will feel that our votes make a difference and feel empowered to civically engage and participate in the democratic process. We request that our community's voting power is not diluted so that we have an opportunity to be fairly represented and to have elected leadership that is accountable to our communities. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for the information that you've provided.
Mr. Chair, I have
Sure.
a question.
Sure.
If Sherry would take
Would
it.
you entertain a question from one of the members?
Hi, my name is Rod Dembowski, and I live in Seattle and grew up in Renton, and I'm particularly interested in your concerns. First, it was raised a couple of points or times tonight, and I do think folks should know that we were appointed by the King County Council and asked to serve in this capacity, and each of us was appointed unanimously by the council, and so we did not really have a role in deciding who was going to be on the committee, but we're doing our very best through the public hearing process to listen to and think about and act as appropriately as possible to the input from all members of the community and to listen to all communities of interest and how they want to participate in this process. So thank you for coming tonight and for your input. My question to you was more of a technical one. I thought I heard you say that the proposed, in the map you've given us, the proposed majority-minority districts are orange, pink, and purple. And I don't see I see an orange on here. I think I see a pink, but I'm not sure which.
It's neon pink.
Neon pink.
The one that includes Federal Way.
Okay, almost a
and
reddish
then purple
color.
to the east. Yeah, I guess.
Okay. Orange, red. Okay, got it. So there would be the area which we're now in, southeast Seattle, then heading down Tukwila, SeaTac, Des
Includes
Moines,
White Center, Tukwila,
to Federal
SeaTac,
Way,
Federal Way.
and then a Kent, Renton, Newcastle area. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone else wish to make any comment to us? Yes, sir. And if you could identify yourself.
My name is Lonnie Lusardo. I live in Seattle. I'm a member of a number of organizations and groups, none of which I think are really pertinent to this. I have a question of the group, and the comments that you made earlier about the way you were appointed, I certainly respect. There may be information about you that I don't know, but looking at the group makes me think all of you are white people. So do you mind if I ask, are there any people of color on the committee? A process of appointing people that results in an all-white committee for something this important is flawed. It is just flawed. What I would like to know, I'm a white person myself, what I would like to know is in the redistribution, what do each of these districts end up changing in the ethnic profile of the communities? So that is to say, do any of these changes result in more people of color, fewer people of color? And with tremendous respect to Cherry and her organization, that's the same kind of information that I want to know. I am a cultural competency professional. This is my work. This is what I do. This map gives me no indication of that information, and I would like to know.
You know, John, do we have that census data? Isn't that census data that's available and has been made available, I know, to us and to the public?
Yes, there is census data about persons of color.
Absolutely, and I think is there census data that, and it could be that it's a matter of accessing that's the problem, but the census data that we see, I also remember seeing data that shows where the growth has been among different groups in the county on an ethnic basis or a racial basis as well. I remember that we saw that, and in the early public meetings that we had, Mr. Luzardo, we had that information available. It's available to anybody, and it's part of the census data. And when we started the meeting, I read to you what the law requires us to do, and I think we had a discussion about that. And I think that we have tried to meet those responsibilities as best we can. And I'm trying to think, John, if we have, do you have that? Can you draw that up for us now? Any of that information from what the U.S. Census Bureau did regarding ethnic data?
No, that's not been prepared for the committee.
For this presentation today?
Right, it has not been. Yeah.
But Lonnie, my name is Rod Dembowski, and I think I've had the benefit of your participation in the Leadership Tomorrow program, learning a little bit about some cultural competencies and at least awareness to those, and I suppose that's a lifelong bit of work that we all try and work on and understand. So I appreciate the past learning I've had from you, and I'm glad to see you here tonight. But I think I would be happy to, work with you if possible, because we do have that data. It may take a little bit of work, but we could tell you the racial and ethnic makeup of the current districts and how those numbers would look in the proposed new districts. I do want to say that the law precludes us from using racial data to favor or disfavor any particular group in the drawing of the lines. We've been advised by council that doesn't mean we can't look at it, and some of us think we should to make sure we're not doing any harm. But there is that particular prohibition on us. But I am offering to work with you and John Schlosser if necessary to get you the data, because I think that would be interesting to see the impact of these lines. And remember what our chair has said, and that is that these are 4 discussion drafts. The final map is probably not going to be one of these. There's going to be a lot more work to do. And a lot of that work is based on the input we're out here listening from the community to get. So.
Yes, sir.
There's a tremendous amount of information available on that website. I don't specifically remember seeing racial data, but I didn't look at all of it.
Well, that was my question to John. I think it's in the data, and I think it's in the data that we saw at one of our meetings. I remember looking, and it's come up several times. This isn't the first time this has come up. But I'm thinking more of accessing it for people that want to comment on that. Could they do it through our website, or would they have to go to the Census Bureau website to do that? What would you recommend, John, since we can't get that here tonight, apparently?
I don't believe it's on the redistricting website, and I do think that probably, besides going to the source, which would be the Census Bureau, which is a little bit awkward in terms of a source for this sort of thing. There's been a very clear series, and I think very well done series of articles in the Seattle Times about this very subject, about where growth has happened, where has there been change in the proportion of people of color. And I'm sure if the committee directs me to prepare something like that, that's pretty easily prepared specifically for the committee. Okay.
We did receive a presentation, maybe on our very first meeting or one of the very first meetings from John, with some terrific maps, which are still available, that show the diversity in the county. I mean, one of my takeaways from that, which was very interesting, was that King County is more diverse today outside of the city of Seattle than it is inside of the city of Seattle. And there's been tremendous growth in diversity in the last 10 years in the east side and the South County. And so we have some of that information available, and I think, Lonnie and Cherry, we could get an impact analysis, if you will, done probably without a tremendous amount of difficulty. And I'm pledging to work with you, if you're interested in that, to do that, as long as my committee members don't shut me down.
Well, I think those comments are well taken. Why don't we have that information, John? Why don't we simply have that on our website, so it's easier accessible than requiring somebody to, yeah.
This is the map, I think, Rod, that you were talking about that was shown in the very first meeting. It's distribution of non-white population from April 2010 census. It's not quite probably as detailed as maybe you had in mind. It doesn't break it down by district or by ethnic subgroup or race. But that data is part of the census data, so it's pretty easily prepared.
It's really hard to see from here, but what is that? If somebody were to go to our website, could they access that a lot easier?
They could get it in a form that they could zoom in like this as close as they want to get. Each dot represents 15 persons of color.
Okay.
One has to be cautious with that term, though. So there's some detailed description on the margin of the map describing how that's computed.
Well, that's being shown. John Jensen, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I think maybe, and I'll be ready to be corrected, but maybe just to give them an idea of our thinking and the parameters that we're working under. First of all, I think District 5 is currently a majority-minority district.
Very close.
Or very close. It's not, is it 49? District 2? I think District 5. I think, I'll stand and be corrected, but I think District 5 is also very close. I was surprised when I saw it too, but.
According to the win-win numbers.
Yeah, I think it was according to the win-win numbers, but I'd be corrected. But I think when we come out to public hearings, what's important for us to hear, because we are, the attorneys, the prosecuting attorney that's assigned to our committee let us know that just going in and looking and saying, let's create minority-majority districts, I don't think that's an appropriate way for us to operate based on the law. But what is appropriate for us to do is to go out, hear from the community and say, hey, this is a large Punjabi community, or this is a large community of color that we feel is a community of interest for a reason, and then we become aware of that, and we make an effort not to bisect that community or disenfranchise it. But as far as looking at a grand area, I'm not sure that that's actually something that legally we can attack the problem from or the challenge from. I'm not sure if that's a way to interpret it, but at least that's the way I'm operating, and so I look forward to be.
Well, there have been changes in the last 10 years, we know, in District 5 and District 6. And I think it's important what Mr. Lozano said about getting the information as we're trying to provide for you here and looking at and see what those changes are. But I also urge you to keep in mind 214,000 people, that's however you decide in a county of this size and having 9 districts, it's a challenge. It really is. It may appear, and we really appreciate what you've done, but there's a lot of other things that we're required to balance, and we will. We'll also listen to you, and we have. And this is important to continue the discussion. Do any of my colleagues have any other comment on this? I know there's other people that want to talk on just this. Okay, sure.
One last note, speaking of the law, there are federal laws that do protect and prohibit the vote dilution of communities of color, and that's the Federal Voting Rights Act. I know that there are certain parameters under the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act in terms of whether or not there is violation, but there is precedence, there are laws out there that in general protect the vote dilution of communities of color. So wanted to note that.
That certainly is correct, and I usually go into a little discussion of that. I didn't tonight, but you're absolutely right, starting with Baker versus Carr, the Voting Rights Acts. There's been a whole lot of federal, state, and local elaboration. There are laws, there are court decisions. There's been a lot since Baker versus Carr, a lot that's happened. But I think what you just said is absolutely correct and appropriate for us to look at.
Could I ask her a follow-up question?
Sure.
You mentioned that District 3 had 2 minority-majority districts. Obviously, you analyzed the other 3 maps. Did you sort of stack rank them in terms of your, sort of point of view as to which map, so 3 was able to do 2 of the 3 that you were hoping for. In terms of the other maps, did the analysis, do you have some insight into that?
They were honestly pretty close.
Okay.
I think 3 and 1 had the 52 and 51%.
Okay.
If I can recollect.
Yeah.
And then the proposal 1
Yeah.
had one at like 53% and
Yeah.
another at 50%.
Yeah.
And then 1 and 4 were about even.
And then
So
2 is-
they were pretty close, but I think that's just given the
Yeah.
population and
Yeah.
demographics of King County.
Okay.
Okay. Does anybody else want to address this or have any questions? Yes, sir. And there's a mic. You can stay where you are or use the handheld one. All right.
My name is Henry Yates, and I'm a resident of Seattle. I am also associated with United for Fair Representation. I hadn't planned on saying anything this evening, but the comments that had been made earlier kind of prompted me to make a couple of relatively pointed comments. The first is the point that was made earlier by the woman sitting on the other side of the room was a bit off base, obviously. She was talking about school districts in one breath, but she was also talking about representation. And I thought that point was very much appropriate, or very appropriate and right on target. I was a little, with all due respect, I was a little taken aback by the humorous comment made about Rainier Beach. That was not funny. It is very serious, the work that you folks are doing, and the impact of that work will have a huge impact on folks of color. And so I would suggest that you refrain from those kinds of comments in the future. Personal request, but one that I can assure you many folks of color would take offense to. 35%, as Cherry mentioned, of the county is populated by people of color. That number is significantly higher than it was when the last census was done, as you, I'm sure, know. And I recognize that you folks had nothing to do with the composition of your committee. I will, I guess, direct my disappointment to the council in that regard. Because, as I mentioned previously, this is a very, very important exercise, and one that will have an impact on folks of color who a lot of times need government services more than others do for 10 years out. And I'm not real sure that the perspective of folks of color is necessarily fully represented on this body. No fault of your own, but am I getting the hook here? Or, oh, that was your cell phone. Okay.
I thought I had that on mute, but
Yeah,
I apologize, Mr. Yates.
Thinking somebody was going to come back and yank me
No.
out of my chair. But so I make my comments in a constructive way. I make them also in a very respectful way. But I am disturbed. I appreciate the gentleman whose name I did not get, but who's associated with cultural competency, and his comments, they were very appropriate. I would simply ask that this committee recognize that it is in somewhat of a deficit in terms of understanding the needs of folks of color in the county, and take as serious, obviously, as you can, and I know that you are doing your job with the utmost attention to its critical nature. But I think that it is critical for you to be responsive to folks of color, especially given the percentage of their population. And when I talk about people of color, I'm talking about Native Americans, African Americans, Asians and Hispanics that are located that are in King County, and those numbers are at about 35% from what I understand. So I'll end there. I want to applaud you for your performing your civic duty. I ask that you again pay special attention to the issue of people of color, given our reliance on government services, but also the lack of the historical lack of representation in both elective and appointive government that we have experienced, and the many, many issues that need to be addressed, not just in our communities, but in the county in general, that can be better resolved with full participation of everyone. Thanks.
Thank you for those comments.
Judge,
Oh, okay.
I'm confident that Mr. Yates, I would like you to understand, and I'm glad that you addressed that she spoke about school districts first and then moved into another area, and I was still on the school districts. And the reason is, it's a very important one. There is an unincorporated area between Renton and Seattle, and it's called West Hill. Skyway, Lake Ridge, that area there. I grew up in Rainier Beach. That's very appropriate for what she was talking about, because in that area, the school districts do overlap, and in kind of a funny way. I had a Seattle address. I lived in Rainier Beach, easily in the city, but if you go up onto the hill, that area there, in the unincorporated area, many of those people identify with Seattle. Some identify with Renton as you get down into Bryn Mawr. It's an area that is not well served right now by county government, or I should say by local government, because the county is its local government. So it's kind of this no man's land between Seattle and Renton. That is one of the areas that if you look at the map, it's a major change. It's one of the major population shifts, and we've had more input, I think, on that area from officials than maybe any other areas specifically. And if you look at the maps, I think 3 out of the 4 of them put that entire PAA or proposed annexation area in District 5. But one of the requests from all of the people in that area relative to representation was, don't split that up anymore. Don't have this boundary going down the middle of that unincorporated area. So as much as I'm comfortable with who I am, and I appreciate you speaking up, because I would not have want you to have left with an impression that I didn't want you to leave with. She was talking about the school districts, and that is a critical point in that area. And I'm glad that we're addressing it, but I do appreciate your comment. You know, I could have been more clear, and we were a little bit off of the norm, but we, Rod and I always talk about wanting to get a dialogue going, and sometimes that's why politicians might avoid that, because you say things that can be misunderstood. But I do appreciate you speaking up, because I would much rather clarify it than have you leave with that understanding.
All right. Anybody else have any comments they'd like to make? Okay. Yes, sir.
I'm John Morgan. I just have a couple basic questions. Are you allowed to consider, when you're drawing district boundaries, the residences of the current 9 council members?
Not at all. I mean, it would be, I don't even know where they live. I assume they live in their present districts. I don't know where, though.
Okay, so that may preclude my second question, which is, do you know if any of these 4 draft maps put any of the current council members in a different district than they represent now?
I don't know the answer to that, and maybe the members of the panel do. I'm not sure the answer to that.
It's my understanding, Mr. Chair, that each of these 4 drafts result in maps that do not change the district of an existing council member.
Okay.
I think that's
That's my
correct.
understanding as well.
I think as a political activist and a bit of a political science junkie, I would certainly find it interesting for that information to be included along with the draft maps.
Which is just to be clear, what you mean is that any of these maps, if adopted, we said earlier we don't have to adopt any of them. None of them would result in any of the current incumbents having to change their address in order to, if they choose to continue to run for the position they serve on. Is that what you're saying?
Right. I'd be interested to see whether any of the maps put two incumbent council members in the same district, and on the flip side of that, leave a new district without an incumbent member. So basically, someone has to either move or retire.
Sure.
So maybe map where the current representation lives, basically.
Yeah.
On all the different versions. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
Interesting.
Those that's out there, and I appreciate that comment, Mr. Mark. It might be of interest to you also that in as an elaboration on your question, it did occur to the committee that the people who have the most to benefit or not by what we're doing are the county council members and perhaps to a lesser degree the county executive. And in thinking about that, we did adopt a Rule 5, that I don't believe has any precedent anywhere, that we decided to adopt. And that Rule 5 requires that any contact by any council member or their staff or the county executive or his staff with reference to any of these maps that indicate either a favor or disfavor of it is to report it to the whole group at a public meeting. I mean, we've done our best to make sure that it certainly is appropriate if a county council member or county executive wants to comment on it. They have a right to their free speech, but because of what's at stake, that's to be reported at a public meeting, just as another information, a piece of information for you. Thank you. Anything else? Okay. Yes, sir. Why don't you step forward and let us know who you are?
My name is Scott Forbes. I'm a current resident of District 2, and in the interest of full disclosure, I am the chair of the 43rd District Democrats, which is another group of interest that the council or that the redistricting committee cannot consider. But I want to bring up what may be a community of interest that you can consider, which is transit. And most of my brethren in the 43rd and sistren in the 43rd District Democrats are actually at the King County Council Transportation Committee tonight, which has literally hundreds of people attending. And some of these maps, some of the concerns I wanted to raise, take members of the 43rd and split them up into different districts in ways that break up a shared interest in transit. The current District 2 includes, well, I'll do this the other way around. The 43rd District currently is split across Districts 2 and 4, and both of those districts are within, I believe, within the Seattle city limits today. And due to a quirk of the map, I think we have one precinct each in Districts 1 and 8. But not a lot of representation there. But some of these maps, in particular, Draft 1 is taking people from the University District and grouping them in with people from Shoreline, Lake Forest Park, and not in with Capitol Hill and Fremont and Wallingford and the rest of the 43rd. And I think you would agree that the people who are in Capitol Hill, the people who are in the University District, in Fremont, Wallingford, Madison Park, have similar interests in transit and similar interests in King County Metro services, and that diluting that interest may be detrimental to having some very strong pro-transit advocates on the King County Council. And as I look at these maps, the maps 1 and 3 in particular, are splitting up the 43rd and splitting up that community of interest in transit. Maps 2 and 4 preserve the lines as they cross the 43rd today.
Thank you for that input, and that's a really important input. And I don't think you'd be surprised that your fellow citizens in the cities across the top, Kenmore, Bothell, and Lake Forest Park, probably agree with you regarding that lack of community of interest. So, and we see that where people who live in a certain area, who really like where they live and feel that their next door neighbors share similar values, want to remain part of that. It isn't always Seattle and the rest of the county. Sometimes it is. And we really appreciate that input. It's important for us. Do my colleagues have any questions or comments, either of this gentleman or any of the other speakers that we've heard from? Okay. Keep in mind our website at kingcounty.gov/districting is another way to follow our work as well as to have input. Appreciate all of you taking the time to come and visit with us and talk with us tonight. Unless there's anything further, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.